Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tammy Stackelhaus, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with FibroFog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. You're listening to the Fibromyalgia Podcast with Tammy Stackelhaus, Episode 6. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tammy Stackelhaus. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about your role as a patient in your own healthcare. Now, this is a pretty broad topic, so today I'm just going to talk about some general ideas, and we'll get into more specifics about better ways to communicate with your providers and a few of those things on future episodes. First, I want to start with a couple of stories to talk about this idea. The other day, I was having a massage, and I noticed while I was lying there that my brain was elsewhere. I was thinking about all of the things that I had to do. I was thinking about this podcast. I was thinking about people I had to contact for interviews and the artwork I had to create. And basically, even though my body was lying there on the massage table, I was working. I was in my office in my head. And I just stopped myself and I thought, wait a minute, I'm in a massage. So let me actively participate in that massage. Now, when I say actively participate, I don't mean that I started massaging myself while she was working on my body. What I mean is that I aligned my mind and I aligned my spirit and my energy and my emotions to the same wavelength as my massage therapist while she was working on me. I focused on relaxing. I focused on letting my muscles relax and letting go of tension in the areas where she was working on me. I focused on calming down my body, my mind, and my spirit, and really put myself in a frame of mind of receiving rather than the working frame of mind that I was in. And making that little mental shift makes a big difference in the amount of benefit that you're going to get from something like massage. I have actually had massage therapists tell me, oh my goodness, you are such a joy to work on. You are so good at receiving massages. And that might sound like kind of an odd thing because really all you're doing is lying there, right? But I think that idea of attuning your mind, your body, and your spirit to an attitude of receiving and being open to receiving the benefits and relaxing your body, your mind, and your spirit actually makes that massage go farther. The other example, the other story I wanted to give you was back when I was first starting to feel better. The doctor that I was seeing at the time, at the end of one appointment, I said, I just really want to thank you for everything that you've done to help me feel better. And I've never forgotten her reply. She said, my job is the super easy 2% of telling you what to do. But your job is the really hard 98% of actually doing it. You are the one to thank, not me. And I love her point there. To put that in another context, if you go to the dentist and have them take care of your teeth, but you never go home and actually brush your teeth, what condition do you think your teeth would be in? Yet I think very often we go to a massage therapist or we go to a doctor and we expect to see these miraculous results, only we're expecting them to do the work for us. And it just doesn't work that way. You're the one living inside of your body. You're the one who has to take care of it. You're the one who has to follow through on the instructions. You're the one who has to do the physical therapy exercises. You're the one who has to brush your teeth. So, yes, she's right. Our jobs are the really hard 98% of actually doing the things it takes to feel our best. And our providers' jobs are the easier 2% of telling us what needs to be done. We will talk in another podcast episode about the best way to find a doctor and to get a doctor that actually knows what to do in that 2% that is their job. That's another conversation. I'm just talking about your side of things for right now. So, how do you go about doing this? How do you go about doing that really hard 98% of following through? And what is your role in your healthcare? Well, the simple answer is advocating for yourself, speaking up for what your needs are, and then following through on what your doctor, your provider is telling you to do. The harder answer is, of course, figuring out those things, right? Like figuring out what are my needs? What are my goals? What is the outcome that I want? And learning how to communicate that, as well as the hard part of figuring out the right providers that are going to tell you the right things to do that are going to help you feel better. So, your job as a patient isn't just to show up and say, hey, fix me. Your job is to make sure that you're finding the right providers to help you. Your job is to have some faith and some trust in those providers, follow their instructions exactly if you can. And of course, speak up if there's some reason where you can't, or some reason why you feel like following those instructions would be harmful to you. You are the one that lives in your body. There is nobody that is a bigger expert on who you are and how you feel than you. There is nobody else in the entire planet, in the entire universe, in the history or future of the universe who knows what it's like to live inside the body that you have right now, other than you. So you are the world's foremost expert on living in your body. And so when you talk to your doctors, that is actually a place that you can speak from. Now, we have to do this, of course, with grace and diplomacy, right? Where we are speaking to our doctors, not in we don't want to put them down, just like we don't want them to put us down, right? But we can speak from this place of, I know what it's like living in my body. I understand what you're saying, but that isn't my experience living in my body. This is what my experience is. The other thing that we need to do is provide good information to our providers so that they can make the best recommendations, the best diagnosis, and help us in the best way possible. If for any reason we are holding back information or give incorrect information, then they are going to come to incorrect conclusions, maybe make an incorrect diagnosis, and give us incorrect instructions on how to improve. I'll give you an example. Back when I was not doing very well with fibromyalgia, I discovered that I could really only leave the house about once a week if I wanted to stay feeling as good as possible. If I didn't want to feel worse, which my good wasn't all that good back then. So if I didn't want to feel worse, I could really only leave the house about once a week. And in talking with my doctor, instead of just flat out saying it like that, I can only leave the house once a week, right? What I would do is I would go in and, being the positive person that I am, I would talk about all the things I could do and not talk about the things I couldn't do. So for instance, I would walk in and say, hey, I was able to go to Costco this week. Woohoo! But then my doctor wasn't seeing the whole picture of the fact that the whole rest of the week I was stuck at home in bed or on the couch, probably in the same pair of pajamas all week. And I only got up, got dressed, and left the house once. That happened to be to go to Costco. She didn't see the whole picture of the fact it took me 2 days to recover from that trip to Costco. She didn't see that whole picture because I wasn't presenting her with the entire picture. I was presenting her with the positive side I wanted her to see. I wasn't trying to be deceptive. It was just my nature to focus on the positive instead of the negative. So as a participants in our own healthcare, it's our responsibility to give our providers the full picture. And this also goes the other way, right? If you are someone who tends to be a half empty kind of a person, you don't want to only tell your providers the negative side and not tell them the positive side. So we need to give a balanced perspective. Another thing that I think is important as part of this, as a way to give them this balanced, true, big picture perspective of how we're doing, is to use data, to use numbers, to use quantities, to use objective descriptors as much as possible. One of the ways I find to do this is to use tracking forms. So we'll link to a few in today's show notes that you can download and use throughout your day-to-day life so that when you see your doctor, you've got this information for them. One of them is a pain and a fatigue tracking form where you can just real simply write down what your pain level or what your fatigue level is for the day. When you go to your provider and you hand them a sheet that has 4 months worth of you writing down your pain and your energy levels every day, and they can see that on average you're running at about a 7 or an 8, that's a lot different than walking into your appointment and saying, my pain level is at a 7 right now, and them possibly thinking it's a one-off experience. Maybe you're in a flare, rather than really realizing, oh, she's at a 7 all the time, right? Like how we approach those two things are going to be very different from a provider perspective. If you're in a flare, there might be certain things that we do temporarily to help bring your pain down. If that's the pain level that you're at all the time, maybe we need to rethink your whole pain management strategy, maybe consider other therapies, other medications, other options to help lower your pain on a day-to-day level. So you can see how those two things might be different. So again, numbers, quantities, data, tracking those things can be super, super helpful. The other thing that I noticed when I went to the doctor and was sharing information, it's a whole lot different to say, I can't stand very long. Well, what does very long mean, right? If I say I can't stand very long, that is very different than I can only stand for 5 minutes or I can only stand for an hour. Depending on who you are, not very long. Like if you're somebody who normally stands for a living, maybe you work in a retail store where you're on your feet all day, or maybe you're a waitress and you discover, oh gosh, I just can't stand longer than an hour. That's a whole lot different than somebody who maybe has a secretarial job where they're normally sitting down, and when they're standing in line, at the grocery store, and they're only standing there for 10 minutes, that's too long, right? So these are all things that our providers need to know in order to treat us properly. So again, quantify, use numbers when possible. Do a little bit of troubleshooting on your own. As a patient, it's our responsibility to, again, provide the best possible amount of information to our providers. Now, you can't know every possible thing that they may ask you, but there are things you can be pretty sure they're going to ask, right? Like if you go somewhere and you tell them you're in pain, they're going to ask you things like, how long has it hurt? What kind of pain is it? Is it dull? Is it sharp? Is it tingling, electrical kind of pain? Is it a ripping, tearing kind of pain? Like we need to build our pain vocabularies. They're also going to ask things like, what activities make it hurt more? What things make it hurt less? These are all typical, normal questions, troubleshooting, problem-solving questions that your providers are going to ask you. And knowing that Your job as a patient is to have those answers. Now, there may be some things, of course, that you just don't know, right? You can't go out there and try every possible activity on the planet to see what hurts and what helps, but you can make a note as you go throughout your day. And I literally do mean making a note, like on a pad or in your phone, literally writing it down, because fibro fog, right? We go to the doctor and we can't remember. So literally write this stuff down. Make a note of the things that help, make a note of the things that hurt. If you notice any patterns, that can also be super helpful. So for instance, if you notice, every time I work at the computer, I end up with a bad headache, right? Or every time I go to this particular office or this particular store that has fluorescent lights, I end up, in a flare. Whatever it is, any patterns that you can see, make a note of those, because that will actually help your providers help you better. Another thing to remember is that while your providers are experts, they did go to medical school, they also don't know everything, right? I think our primary care providers, especially, they have to know a little bit about a lot of stuff, right? So go in with the perspective of you are collaborating with them. Your job is to help them help you, right? So your job is to give them the information so that they can then use their training and their skills to come up with the right diagnosis or the right treatment plan. Don't fall into the trap of telling them what you think they want to hear. So, for instance, if you really like your doctor, or you really like your massage therapist, or you really like your physical therapist, it can be very tempting to tell them it's working, or the massage was good when maybe it caused a flare up, or yes, I did my physical therapy exercises when really you didn't. Because giving that incorrect information or incomplete information is going to lead them to think that you're responding in a certain way to treatment, where they may, if they knew you weren't, make some adjustments, right? Now, I know a lot of providers. Working as a coach, as a fibromyalgia patient myself, I know a lot of providers. And there's a lot that I consider personal, close friends. So I get the inside, behind the scenes scoop from them quite often. And I can tell you that there is nothing more frustrating to your doctors and to your providers than two things. Number one, having the same conversation with you over and over again. So, for instance, if your doctor is telling you, I need you to go gluten free so we can see if gluten is triggering some of these symptoms. Or if your doctor says, I need you to do these strengthening exercises so we can see if that helps with your muscle weakness and pain. You really need to do those things. There's a reason they're telling you to do that. So find the best way possible to do it. And if there's some reason you just can't do it, then have that conversation with your provider. They feel like they're banging their heads against the wall, just like you do, right? It's no different. So be sure and communicate and just be honest. The other thing that's super frustrating for them is when there isn't that collaborative effort of I'm sharing honestly with you in an effort to find the best solution, right? So I actually find it super interesting when patients actually really do know their bodies and can come in and say, hey, I tried that. This is what I experienced in my body. Is that okay? Is that not okay? I'll give you an example. With my new chiropractor, after moving to Seattle from Portland, they gave me some special neck stretches to do. I have this little foam pillow thingy I lay on to try to get the curve back into my neck. And as I lay on that pillow, there are a lot of different things that I have experienced. I have experienced some sort of tingling, warm, tingling feeling in my neck, a little bit burning. I've experienced some things where I'm laying on it right about here, but I'm experiencing some pain up here. I've experienced some nausea. I've experienced some headaches. I've experienced some just general agitation. I don't want to lay here anymore in this thing, right? So, communicating all of those different things with my chiropractor helps her know how to help me, right? She can tell me, oh, sounds like you need to stay at that number of minutes. We don't want you to be on there any longer until that feeling goes away. Or, that feeling is totally normal, because we really are changing how the body structure is set, and we're getting that curve back in your neck. And so a little bit of being uncomfortable is totally normal, and that's actually what we want. She might say, oh, that sounds like we've got something we've got to fix in your neck. If you're feeling that sharp pain up there, we need to take a look and correct that. Or she might say, oh, everything feels totally fine. You're not experiencing anything negative. That means we need to bump up how many minutes you're laying on it, right? So the more communication I give her, the better she can help me. I know I've said that about 5 times in this podcast, but it's because it really is true. The more information you give them, the better they can help you and the better results that you get. So that is a huge part of your job as a patient in your healthcare, is being the voice for your body and communicating with your providers. I also want to talk just a little bit about the placebo effect. It has a negative connotation, right? We usually see it when we're talking about testing a particular treatment or testing a particular medication. They'll do like a double-blind study where neither group knows whether they're getting the actual medication or a sugar pill, and noticing that, the people who got the sugar pill actually got better too. That's the placebo effect. But let me put it to you in a different way. The placebo effect is the effect that you get when you believe something will work and therefore it works. Well, there is nothing wrong with that. If I really believed that taking a sugar pill would help me feel better, and it did, what would be wrong with taking that? Nothing, in my opinion. And it's also showing just the power that our minds have over how our body feels. There is so much power in your mind. Now, please do not think that I'm saying that fibromyalgia is all in your mind, or that we can control our pain with our minds. But I am saying that there is probably more that you can accomplish with your minds and with your thinking than you think you can. There is a lot there. So your job is to trust and to believe, and just go in with an attitude of, let's try and see. In many cases, what's the harm? Now, one of the questions that I got from a reader, yes, actually it was on my Facebook page. One of the questions I got from someone on my Facebook page recently was, how do we know if taking medication is worth it or not? Are the side effects worth it? Should you medicate or should you not? And that is a great question that I'm going to be answering in a future episode. But for now, aside from that question, if your doctor wants you to try something, unless you have a real reason not to, in which case you should discuss that reason with them, you probably should try it. This idea of trying things and seeing whether or not they work is actually part of the diagnostic process. So back when I used to manage the tech support department for a software company, there were many times that I would be talking with someone who is having an issue with their software, and we would have to try something to see what happens. I couldn't just cut open her software and see what was wrong. Some ways we could, but like over the phone, that's, just like with a human body, that's not the first step, right? So we try things to see what that response is, to help us know what direction to go next. So sometimes when your doctor says, hey, I want you to try this, that is actually part of the diagnostic procedure. That is actually part of how they're going to figure out what the problem is and how we can fix it. So if they ask you to go gluten free and you don't, then we don't know if that actually is an issue or not. You don't know if that could have helped you. Again, if there's a reason, a very strong reason why you don't want to do something, then that is the conversation that you need to have. For instance, if somebody prescribes you a particular medication, you read the side effects, you have some real concerns, that is absolutely something to talk to your doctor about. Another reason to follow through on what your doctor is suggesting that you do is that in many countries, and here in the US with many insurance programs, there is something called fail first or step therapy. And what that means is, in order for the insurance company to approve perhaps a more expensive procedure, they have to show that other less expensive things did not work for you. I'll use my migraines as an example. Having Botox injections for your migraines is a very expensive procedure. Even with insurance, it costs me close to $2,000 at the beginning of the year when I haven't met my deductible. At the end of the year, it's more manageable. It's more like $300 or $400, but it's still expensive, right? Now, before the insurance company wants to cover all of that, they want to make sure that it's not just we don't go straight to that, right? It's also a little bit more risky, right? You are literally injecting a neurotoxin into your head. So there's some risks there. Same thing if you were maybe going to have some type of a surgery. There might be things they want to try first because of the risks and the costs involved in that particular surgery. If you don't try the earlier things, the less expensive things, they may not cover the more expensive ones. It's also important that you keep all of your records on these things. I was just talking with a client a couple weeks ago who said that her insurance told her she wasn't approved for this particular therapy because she hadn't tried other things first. And she had all of her records and was able to say, nope. Yes, I did. In fact, you paid for them. Here's the records. I would like this covered. So, as the patient, as the advocate for yourself and your own health care, you, number one, want to make sure you try those things as a way of eliminating what may or may not work. And two, keep track of it, because as much as we would love to say that our healthcare system is keeping track of all of this for us, the reality is there aren't always. You may change insurance companies, you may change doctors through no fault of your own. You're the in my case, my husband's company switched the people they were getting healthcare through. So we couldn't stay with the same plan. We had to switch. I've had situations where, I get a letter out of the blue that my doctor left at the practice and I have to find another one. So there are lots of things that could come up. And so you have to be the one that is responsible for your care, meaning you are keeping your own medical records, you are keeping a file. That's a whole nother thing we'll talk about someday, keeping a file of your own medical records, and really having all of that information. You are the only person who can be 100% responsible for that. You are the only person that is with you all the time, right? So make sure that you are keeping your records, that you're making notes of these things, and that you are following through with your very best effort on the things that your providers are recommending that you do. Now, sometimes what is challenging about this is figuring out how to take what they're telling you to do and integrate it into your daily life. And this is something where I personally found working with a coach was the thing that made the difference for me. So my doctor had been telling me for quite a while a few things to change in my diet, and I just was having a difficult time figuring out how to do it. Really, it was all about going gluten-free and figuring out how to eat in the same house as other people when I'm gluten free and they're not, and just like how to do it, right? Working with a coach was so helpful for me because we could have those conversations of, okay, there's this family get together we're going to over the weekend. How do I make sure there's something there that I can eat? How do I, avoid the birthday cake when it's my birthday and I'm supposed to be gluten free? Like talking through all of these things. How do I go out to eat at a restaurant if I need to be gluten free? I'm just using this as an example, of course, but it applies to all kinds of things. It could be things like, I'm supposed to do these physical therapy exercises, but I always forget until I show up at my appointment and they ask me if I've done them. And I'm like, no, right? So, talking through this with someone, strategizing with someone can be hugely helpful for helping to actually implement the things your providers are telling you to do. Of course, I'm using the example as a coach because it was the thing that helped me the most, but it could be a family member. It could be a friend, somebody who has good problem solving skills, someone who can see things from a slightly different perspective and maybe come up with some solutions that you wouldn't have thought of because you're sort of lost in the middle of the forest and you need somebody who can see the bigger picture, right? I think it's really hard for us to see our own stuff. And so sometimes it can be helpful to have someone looking from an outside perspective to help us with that. So, your action steps for this episode, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to take responsibility for your own healthcare. Be the person who is keeping track of your medical records. Be the person who is doing that troubleshooting before you go to the doctor's appointment. Write down what you're experiencing, your pain, your energy levels, when things get worse, when things get better, what your averages are, how many bad days you have a month. And is a bad day for you an 8 or a 9, or is a bad day for you a 4? Right? We're all different. Start thinking in terms of numbers and quantities and making a note of them so that when you do see your provider, you have that information. I usually have a note on my phone that between appointments, I'll just make a note on there for the things that have come up so that I've got a record. Because if my next appointment isn't for another 2 months, it's super easy to forget. So, the other thing I want you to do is try to actively participate from an emotional, energetic, thought perspective, like that story I was telling you about with my massage. When you go into something like that, whether it's a doctor's appointment, a massage appointment, physical therapy, chiropractor, whatever it is, go into that with an attitude of receiving. What information are they giving you? What treatment are they giving you? What benefit are they giving you that you can be open to receiving and mentally, emotionally participate in that and choose to believe and let the placebo effect work for you in a positive way, in a good way, and see an additional benefit just from looking towards a positive outcome. The other thing I want you to do is really start thinking about what you want, what the outcome is you want, what your key concerns are, and trying to communicate those even more clearly, because your job is to provide the information about you, the information about the symptoms you're experiencing, the information about how your illness is impacting your life, and then be open to receiving what your provider is giving you in return in terms of what they think that your treatment options need to be. Start seeing your provider appointments as collaborative instead of you showing up at their mercy and waiting for them to fix you. You want to go in as a participant and as a collaborator instead. Now, we will talk in another episode about how to have some of those conversations with your providers. We're going to talk about how to build your dream team of providers so that you have a team that can help you in the way that you need help. Those will happen in future episodes. But for now, I want you to focus in on your side of the equation and looking at the things that you have total control over, which is the information you provide, the information you keep track of, and how you are actively participating in a mental and emotional way and receiving what they have to offer. So that's it for this episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I hope that you will join us next week as we talk a little bit about the research that has been done on coaching and its benefits. This is going to be a little bit more generic than just fibromyalgia, but I think that the things that they have discovered in terms of how coaching can help also apply to us. So we will have Dr. James Fricton here on the podcast for that. And I look forward to interviewing him. He's doing some really fun things, doing research when it comes to coaching and putting together coaching programs and some things like that. So I hope you join us for that. And then in episode 8, we're going to get specific about fibromyalgia coaching and talking a little bit more about what that is and how that potentially can help you. We are super close to episode 10, which is our Ask the Coach episode. So if there are questions that you have, things that we haven't covered yet, insights that you would like to get from me, please reach out through fibromyalgiapodcast.com and send me your questions so that I can include them in our first Ask the Coach episode in just a few weeks. And as a reminder, all of the show notes, all of the worksheets, all of the research studies that I mentioned, those will all be included in the complete show notes at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. So you don't have to worry about fibro brain and forgetting things. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/6 for today's episode, and you will see everything right there. I thank you for joining me and look forward to talking with you next week. Bye. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. If you're ready to see if working with a fibromyalgia coach can help you feel better faster, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com, where you can schedule a complimentary consultation to explore your options. During this call, we'll discuss your fibromyalgia journey, what your needs and challenges are, and give you recommendations on how to reach your goals the quickest way possible. Thank you for tuning in today, and join us next time as we explore more ways to help you take back control of your life and health. My music and sound editing were done by Daniel Munkus at Subtle Soup Records. Podcast management and creative copy by Sonia Louise of Performance Podcasting.